I never imagined steam could carry that much weight. Until I saw his silhouette through it. It was just water. Just a hot shower. But that moment, that exact second, it felt like the air itself stopped moving. I was standing there still, half wrapped in a towel I wasn't even sure I meant to grab. My chest rising and falling too fast. And there he was, barely visible through the thick fog. Steam curling around his outline like it knew a secret I didn't yet. And I remember thinking, this can't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. But I didn't move, because in that moment, it wasn't about logic. It wasn't about age or boundaries or anything that should have mattered. It was about how still the world felt. About how quiet the ache in my chest suddenly became when he was near. His hand was on the glass, not pushing it open, just there. Resting. Waiting. Like he was giving me the choice. To leave. To breathe. To step away. Or to stay. And the sound, God, the sound. The shower water hitting tile, echoing in the small bathroom. My breath catching in my throat. My heartbeat too loud in my ears. Everything was so loud and yet so intimate, like the world had folded in and left just the two of us in this little pocket of heat and silence. And I know how that must sound. Trust me, if someone had told me a few months ago that I'd be standing barefoot in a stranger's bathroom, heart pounding like I was a teenager again, tall slipping, eyes locked on the shadow of a 60-year-old man I used to call just my neighbor, I'd have laughed. I would have sworn up and down that it wasn't me. I don't do this. I don't do this. But that's the thing about life, isn't it? It doesn't ask. It pulls. It doesn't knock politely at the door of your carefully planned routine. It just slips through the cracks. Right when you think you're finally back in control. He wasn't some fantasy. He wasn't some sugar daddy cliché or a reckless decision wrapped in a midlife crisis. No. He was real. Rugged. Kind in the quietest way. He knew how to fix a leaky sink and pour whiskey without a word. He looked at me like I wasn't broken. Just bruised. And worthy. And that day? That shower? That pause before anything happened. That moment when steam and silence filled the space between us. It cracked something open inside me. Not because we touched, but because we almost did. It wasn't lust. It wasn't recklessness. It was recognition. Of loneliness. Of timing. Of all the words we hadn't said out loud. So before I tell you the rest, before I unravel the pieces of how this all started and what it meant, let me just say, if you've been here before, thank you for coming back. Truly. And if this is your first time, welcome. You're safe here. This is a space where the messy parts of life don't get judged. Where hearts are allowed to crack open. And stories don't have to be perfect to matter. So take a deep breath. And come with me. Because the story? It's not just about infidelity. It's about timing. About what we find in the most unexpected corners. And how sometimes it takes a shower, a silhouette, and a silence that says everything to finally feel seen. Let me tell you what happened the day I stopped seeing him as just my neighbor and started feeling everything I didn't know I was allowed to. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon. One of those days where the clouds don't just hang heavy in the sky, they settle into your bones. Everything was gray, still soaked. I remember the soft patter of rain tapping the windows like it had something to say, and the low hum of jazz coming through the old apartment walls next door. Muffled trumpets, lazy piano keys drifting in and out. Like memories I hadn't unpacked yet. The blinds in my living room were half drawn. Dust danced in the warm, golden light bleeding in from the outside. It smelled faintly of rain on concrete, of leftover candle smoke from the night before, and something familiar I couldn't place. I'd just moved in 2 months ago. Divorced. Bruised. Floating in that weird, quiet space between who I'd been and whoever I was supposed to be next. And I didn't say that lightly. Bruised. Because it wasn't just my marriage that broke. It was all the little pieces I gave away over the years without even realizing. The parts of me that bent to be agreeable, to be easy, to be less. Until I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. This apartment was supposed to be my restart. A temporary home with peeling paint and creaky floors. But it felt oddly right. Worn in. Like it had seen women fall apart and put themselves back together before. Like it wouldn't flinch at the sound of me crying behind closed doors. And then there was him. My neighbor. Apartment 3B. 60 years old. Maybe a bit more. He never said. And I never asked. He wore these old faded jeans. The kind that sagged a little at the knees from use. Paired with flannel shirts that looked like they'd survived more winters than I had heartbreaks. He smelled like cedarwood and black coffee. That was the first thing I noticed, actually. That scent. It lingered in the hallway after he passed. Warm, grounding, uncomplicated. He didn't talk much. But when he did, his voice was deep, measured. There was something in it that made you feel like you didn't have to rush your answers. Like silence between sentences wasn't awkward, just part of the conversation. His eyes. God. They didn't stare. They lingered. Not in a way that felt invasive or hungry, but in a way that made me feel seen. Quietly. And maybe that's what unsettled me the most. How seen I felt around him. It wasn't that he said anything specific. He didn't flirt. He didn't cross lines. He just noticed things. He'd nod at me when we passed in the hallway. Sometimes he'd carry my groceries if he caught me juggling too many bags. And once, when I dropped my keys in the rain, he held his umbrella over me until I got the door open, then walked away without a word. There was a steadiness to him, a kind of quiet certainty that I hadn't felt in years, not since before my life started unraveling. And that made the silence between us feel louder than it should have. Every glance, every nod, every small moment where our eyes met and neither of us said anything. It all started to feel like something. I used to tell myself it was nothing. That I was just lonely. That I was reading into things because I missed being looked at like that. Missed being noticed. But the truth? It wasn't just loneliness. It was recognition. Not of who he was, but of who I was when I stood near him. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel like I needed to explain my past or apologize for my hurt. I just was. And in his silence, I felt strangely held. I'd catch myself watching his door sometimes, listening for that soft click when it opened, trying to pretend I wasn't hoping he'd pass by again, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he'd pause a second longer than usual. And on that particular Thursday afternoon, with rain pouring like the sky was grieving something too, I felt it deeper than ever. That unsettled ache. That warm pull of curiosity. That quiet question that sat at the base of my throat every time I thought of him. Why does he feel like home? When I don't even know what home means anymore. It was just after 4. The rain had softened into a mist. That kind of gentle drizzle that you barely hear unless the world around you is already quiet. I was curled up on the couch, legs tucked under me. Still in the same hoodie I'd slept in. A mug of cold tea sat, untouched on the coffee table. The blinds were still half-drawn, the light fading from gold to something softer. Muted amber, like a memory pressed between pages. Then, a knock. Not loud, not impatient. Just there. Measured. I froze. It's funny how a knock can feel like a question, even before anything is said. I opened the door slowly, half expecting a package, maybe a neighbor from another floor. But it was him. Standing there, rain-speckled flannel and all. His collar slightly damp. Hands tucked in his pockets like he had all the time in the world. He tilted his head. Eyes soft, but not searching. Not trying to look through me. Just at me. And then he said it. I can take care of it if you want. You don't have to call anyone. That was it. Simple. Uncomplicated. But something in his voice made my chest ache. He was talking about the faucet. It had been dripping since yesterday. A slow, irritating sound in the bathroom I'd started ignoring. But his voice, The way he said it wasn't about the faucet. Not entirely. Or maybe it was, and I was just hearing it with ears that were hungry for meaning. I can take care of it. There was a kind of care in those words that I hadn't heard in years. Not flirtation. Not charm. Just this gentle offering, like an old poem someone recites from memory without needing to impress you. I should have said no. It would have been the smart thing. I could have said, "Oh, it's fine, I'll figure it out." But I didn't, because maybe I wanted to say yes for a different reason than the sink. Maybe it wasn't about fixing anything. Maybe I just wanted to feel his presence for a little longer. To fill the quiet in my apartment with something steady. I nodded. Said something casual like, "Sure, if you don't mind." He didn't smile, but he looked at me for a second. Long enough that I felt it. Felt the quiet shift in the air. And then he stepped inside. I remember the sound of his boots on the hardwood. The way the air changed around him. How the cedarwood and rain on denim settled into the room like it belonged there. He moved like he'd done this 100 times. Not just fixing sinks, but walking into quiet places without disturbing the dust. I followed him down the hallway, and it hit me how small the apartment felt with him in it. How every room suddenly had corners I'd never noticed before. Shadows that felt softer. Walls that didn't seem so empty. He didn't ask where the bathroom was. He just glanced down the hall and started walking, like he knew. And I walked behind him, heart thudding louder than the faucet ever had. A little too fast. A little too aware. I wasn't thinking about the sink anymore. I was thinking about the way his shoulders filled the doorway. The way his presence settled into the space like it had waited patiently for a reason. I told myself it was nothing. That I was being dramatic. That this was just kindness. Simple, neighborly kindness. But deep down, beneath all the rationalizing and deflection, there was something else. A question that didn't have words yet. A quiet hum beneath my skin. The first low note of a song I hadn't heard in years. And all I knew was, I didn't want him to leave too quickly. I led him down the hallway. And with every step, the distance between us shifted. Not in space, but in something quieter, thicker. The hallway light flickered above us. Old wiring. I'd meant to change the bulb for weeks. Funny, the little things you ignore until someone else steps into your world and notices them. The bathroom door was already open. Steam still clung to the corners from my earlier shower. It smelled like lavender soap and old grout. Warm and lived in. Intimate in the way small spaces can be. Especially when someone new walks into them. He stepped inside first. Didn't hesitate. Just walked in like it was a room he already understood. The light above the mirror was dim, casting a golden hue across the misted glass and cracked tiles. Not broken, just aged. Like the space itself had stories, held things, absorbed silence. The faucet let out another soft drip, and then another. Steady, almost rhythmic, syncing up with the pulse in my wrist. He knelt beside the tub without a word. His hands moved deliberately, confident, practiced. Like they weren't just familiar with wrenches and valves, but with slowness, with care. I watched him in the reflection. His shape bent in concentration. The soft curve of his neck just beneath the collar of his flannel. A small shadow of gray along his jaw. And then, a slow exhale. Like he was releasing something heavy. Something he hadn't meant to carry into my bathroom. I don't know when my breathing changed, but it did. I stood just outside the doorway, arms wrapped around my waist. Not cold, not exactly nervous, just full. Full of thoughts I didn't want to say out loud. Full of awareness. Of how quiet the world felt outside that room. Of how close we were. And that closeness. It started to hum. Not loud. Not even physical, really. Just this low vibration somewhere between us. I watched his hands tighten the pipe beneath the sink. The way his fingers worked with calm precision. His knuckles brushing against porcelain. My eyes wandered. And I hated that they did. Hated and didn't. I took in the worn denim stretched across his back, the steady movement of breath in his chest, the small pause he took before adjusting the valve, as if he felt it too. That shift, that undercurrent, that strange electricity that builds when two people don't say what they're thinking. My mind tried to find footing, tried to call this innocent, helpful, routine. But my body didn't ask for explanations. It just reacted. Softly, subtly, a tightening in my stomach, a warmth spreading low and slow, a single thought I couldn't quite finish. And then, he looked up, not at the sink, not at the faucet, at me. His eyes didn't ask questions. They didn't make assumptions either. They just rested, right on mine, like he was trying to understand something, or maybe, like he already did, and I couldn't move, couldn't step away. I didn't want to. It wasn't the faucet anymore. It wasn't the problem he'd come to fix. It was something else leaking, something I hadn't noticed until now. Me. The version of me I thought had dried up months ago. The woman who still wanted to be seen, still longed to be understood without a single word spoken. And somehow, in this warm, fogged-up bathroom, with water still dripping and breath still catching, that part of me started waking up. Quietly, almost reverently, because watching him kneel there, without expectation, without commentary, doing something so small, so simple, with so much presence, it unraveled something in me, something I hadn't let myself feel in a long, long time. The sound of the wrench tightening the last bolt echoed faintly against the tiled walls, and, just like that, the dripping stopped. He stayed kneeling for a moment longer, his head bowed slightly like he wasn't ready to stand yet. And maybe I wasn't ready for him to either. The air was heavier now, but not with steam, with something else, something quieter, but far more dangerous. He finally stood, wiped his hands on a small rag he'd pulled from his back pocket, and then turned to me with a kind of gentleness that made me ache. "Do you have a towel?" he asked, his voice low, easy, unassuming. I nodded slowly, and moved toward the linen closet just outside the bathroom. My fingers brushed over the fabrics absently, but I wasn't thinking about thread count. I was thinking about the air between us, the way it changed shape, felt charged, like it was listening. I handed him the towel, or I meant to, but somewhere in the handoff, my fingers grazed his, and it was brief. Too brief to call a moment, too long to ignore. My breath caught in the space between our skin, and I looked up, straight into his eyes, and he didn't look away. He held my gaze, like we'd both heard something no one else had said, like there were words floating just above our heads, heavy, invisible, undeniable. And then, like a crack in a quiet song, there it was. A phone buzzed from the kitchen counter. I didn't have to check. I knew the rhythm. 3 short pulses. My ex-husband's voicemail. Second one today. I didn't listen to the first. I wasn't about to listen now. The silence came back sharp. He didn't ask. He didn't shift. But I could feel the presence of that message between us. Not his voice, but his shadow. I leaned against the doorframe, holding onto it like an anchor, like I needed something to keep me from floating away entirely. Then came the second interruption. A call. Mom. Her name flashing across my screen like an accusation. I let it ring. Watched the screen fade to black again. The hallway felt longer now, like it stretched between me and the woman I used to be. The one who always answered, always returned calls, played by the rules that never felt written for her. I could almost hear them. All the voices, quiet, judgmental, lingering just behind the walls. What are you doing? This isn't safe. He's older than your father. He's your neighbor. You've only just moved on. But beneath all those silent warnings, there was one voice I couldn't silence. Why does it feel safer than anything else has in years? Because it did. Safer than my ex's empty promises. Safer than my mother's plans for my recovery. Safer than the echo of my own loneliness at 2 a.m. It felt like standing in a room where someone finally sees you. Not your resume of mistakes. Not your baggage or timelines or scars. Just you. As you are. He took the towel, gently wiped his hands, and then folded it neatly. As if that small act deserved care, he handed it back to me. Not rushed. Not expectant. And I swear, his fingertips lingered again. Or maybe it was mine this time. The line between accidents and intentions was starting to blur. I stepped back slightly. Not because I wanted distance, but because I needed clarity. My body didn't know how to behave anymore. It was humming, slow and low, like an old jazz record playing in the background of a scene you didn't know was important until the last 5 minutes. He looked at me again. Not deeply, not possessively, just openly. And for a second, just a sliver of a second, I wanted to step forward, to ask him to stay, to say something brave. But instead, I said nothing. And he didn't fill the silence either. There was so much being said. In the not saying. A look here. A pause there. A breath drawn just a second too long. And then his voice again. Low, casual. Like the moment hadn't shifted anything. Let me know if it starts leaking again. But it had already started. The leaking. Not from the faucet. From me. From the cracks I didn't know were still there. The ones that let him seep in quietly. Not like water, but like warmth. Like a memory that hadn't happened yet. And as he stepped toward the door, pausing just long enough to make the air tense again, I wondered if he felt it too. That we weren't alone in the room. Even though it was just the two of us. We were standing in the company of every question we weren't ready to answer. And all the feelings we didn't know how to name. He didn't move right away. He just stood there still facing the door, shoulders squared, breath even. But I saw it, that faint shift. The way his chest rose and fell a little deeper than before. He turned slowly. Not like someone in a hurry to say goodbye, but like someone measuring the space between a moment and what could come after it. His shirt clung to his back in small places. Damp from kneeling, from the work, from the still air in that narrow room. I could see the line of his spine through the thin cotton. A map I hadn't meant to trace with my eyes. But did anyway. He looked at me then. Not directly. Not piercing. Just waiting. As though my reaction mattered more than his own next move. As though this whatever this was still mine to steer. And then, his voice, low and careful, came like something too honest to be rehearsed. You can still ask me to go. The sentence didn't rush out of him. It wasn't a dare or an offer. It was a hand extended in the dark. It was a door left cracked open. It was power and vulnerability, shared in one breath. I didn't answer. Not out loud. Instead, I picked up the towel still folded in my arms. The one he'd handed me minutes ago, warm now from being held too long. And I held it out to him. Just that. No words. He reached for it slowly. And our hands touched again. Only this time, the towel stayed between us. Soft. Warmed. A barrier and a bridge. Neither of us moved to pull it away. And it wasn't the touch that shook me. It was the silence that followed. Heavy. Gentle. Patient. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. The kind that asks, do you feel this too? Without saying a thing, my thumb pressed against the corner of the fabric, feeling the pressure of his fingers through it. And still, neither of us stepped back. He didn't move closer. But he didn't let go. And neither did I. I didn't know what I was holding onto anymore. The towel? The moment? The possibility? Or maybe I just didn't want it to end. Not the interaction. Not the hum in my chest. Not the way I felt both exposed and protected all at once. I glanced at his face again. He wasn't looking at me like a man hungry. He was looking at me like a man waiting for a sign. From me. For me. A part of me wanted to speak. to say something smart, to lighten the air, to laugh and deflect and pull away like I always did. But I couldn't, because I knew that once I broke the silence, I'd lose the gravity of what was happening. So I stood there, letting that tension braid itself around us. Soft, slow, laced with every decision I hadn't made yet. I felt my pulse at my throat, not racing, just deliberate, measured, curious. He finally spoke again, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. "You seem tired of being careful." And that line undid something in me. Because he wasn't wrong. I was tired. Tired of walking on emotional eggshells, of smiling through dull conversations, of pretending I didn't miss being looked at like I meant something. I'd spent years being careful. With my marriage, with my grief, with my reputation, with myself. And now this man, my 60-year-old neighbor, with his cedarwood scent and steady eyes, had seen right through it. He didn't reach for me, didn't make a move. He just stood there, tall between us, giving me every chance to retreat. And I didn't move, because something in me had already leaned forward, even if my feet hadn't. That invisible shift, that pull, wasn't in our bodies. It was in the air. It was in the stillness. In the shared question hanging between us. "Are you here too?" My fingers finally let go of the towel. Slowly, deliberately. Letting the fabric slide into his palm like an answer I wasn't ready to say out loud. His hand closed around it, gentle, respectful. He didn't press, didn't prod. He just accepted the moment, accepted me, and something in my chest loosened. Not because anything had happened yet, but because for the first time in a long time, something could. And I wasn't afraid of it. Not with him. Not here. Not now. He dried his hands like he was touching something sacred. Not rushed. Not casual. Just present. Each movement of the towel was deliberate, slow circles over his fingers, along his wrists. His skin was flushed from the warm air, from the kneeling, from the quiet pull between us that neither of us seemed willing to break. I watched him like I wasn't supposed to, like I was seeing something private. Not inappropriate, just intimate. Something usually hidden in the folds of everyday life. I should have looked away. I should have turned and thanked him for the help and walked out and closed a door behind this. But I didn't. I didn't even shift my weight. Because something had already shifted inside me. I took one slow step forward. Not to touch him. Not to do anything dramatic. Just close enough. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his skin. Close enough that the dampness in the air started to feel heavier between us. Close enough that if either of us breathed just a little deeper, we might accidentally inhale the other. And I don't know who moved first. I've played that moment back in my head more times than I care to admit. Slowing it down, rewinding it, searching for the precise second the string snapped. But there's no answer. No clean beginning. Only the shared stillness of two people who didn't step away. Our breath synced. Not on purpose. Just because it wanted to. His chest rose. So did mine. His lips parted slightly. So did mine. A quiet rhythm built without sound, without music, just heartbeats and the hush of a bathroom too small to pretend in. I didn't know what I was feeling. I only knew what I wasn't. I wasn't scared. I wasn't ashamed. I wasn't overthinking, for once. I was there. Fully. My eyes flicked to his. And for a second, I saw it. Not hunger. Not lust. But something far more dangerous. Recognition. Like he saw something in me he'd seen before. Or maybe something he'd lost a long time ago. And he wasn't reaching to take it, he was just noticing it. Remembering it. Holding it with his eyes like it mattered. The tension between us stretched, taut and delicate. Like a violin string right before it's played. A single note suspended. Waiting. I could feel it. In the base of my throat. In the space just below my ribs. That ache. That awful, beautiful ache that comes when you want something you haven't said out loud yet. Something that isn't yours, but somehow already feels like it could be. If only you were brave enough. I wanted to kiss him. That much I knew. Not for what it would lead to, but for what it would mean. A kiss like acknowledgement. A kiss like release. A kiss that said, I see you too. But we didn't. Not yet. We just stood there, breathing in the same thin space. Our mouths a breath apart. Our fingers not quite touching. Our hearts doing all the talking. And still, he didn't make a move. Didn't press in. Didn't chase. He just existed there with me. Inside the pause. Inside the permission. That unspoken yes made of staying still. It was everything I didn't know I needed. To be wanted without being taken. To be near someone who knew how to wait. How to hold back just enough so I could choose the moment myself. My lips quivered slightly. Not from fear, but from pressure. From restraint. From the sheer gravity of what could happen next. And still, we didn't move. We just breathed. Together. Like the world outside the bathroom. Outside the apartment. Outside my old life. Had stopped spinning for us. And in that moment, suspended in warmth and silence and the smell of cedar wood and damp cotton, I felt more seen than I had in years. More alive. More real. And somehow, that was enough. We didn't kiss. We didn't speak. We just settled. Right there on the bathroom floor. Our backs pressed against cool, tired tile. The kind that holds echoes from years before. From footsteps that came and went long before either of us arrived. The faucet had stopped dripping. He'd fixed it. But the air? The air still dripped with something unnamed. Thick, slow, like steam that wouldn't rise or fall. Just hover. I drew my knees up to my chest. He sat beside me, close, but not too close. Not touching, but near enough that if I leaned just a little I'd land on something solid. Someone solid. It was strange. The way the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full. Like it was holding us instead of judging us. Like the stillness wasn't punishment, it was permission. I stared at the opposite wall. Faded white paint. One cracked tile. A faint water stain shaped like nothing at all. And yet somehow, I couldn't stop looking at it. He didn't try to fill the space. Didn't clear his throat. Didn't reach for a joke or a story or a so what now. He just let me breathe. Let me exist. And in that quiet, I realized how rare that was. How rare it is to sit next to someone and not feel like you have to prove anything. Not your beauty. Not your value. Not your pain. I let my head tilt. Just slightly. And without looking, I felt his shoulder rise in welcome. No pull. No pressure. Just presence. And that's when his hand moved slow and steady, brushing a strand of damp hair from my face. Fingers grazing my cheek. Not to stir something, but to settle it. I closed my eyes. Not for a kiss. Not for heat. Just to rest. And when I leaned in barely, it wasn't need. It wasn't want. It was surrender. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that says, I trust this moment. I trust you. Even if just for now. I don't remember how long we sat there. Minutes? Hours? It felt like time forgot about us. Like the world slipped out for groceries and never came back. My voice, when I finally spoke, felt distant. Like it didn't quite belong to me. I never thought I'd feel safe next to someone whose life started before mine did. He didn't answer right away. And thank God he didn't. Because it wasn't a line that needed a response. It just needed to exist. To breathe the same air we were breathing. His hand stayed where it was resting softly on the floor between us. Not searching. Not claiming. Just open. I didn't take it. Not yet. But I noticed it. And that was enough. There was a comfort in the contrast. His rough denim brushing against my cotton pajama pants. His calloused fingers next to my freshly painted nails. His quiet next to my storm. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to be claimed. I didn't need to be desired. I didn't even need to be loved. I just needed to be allowed. Allowed to sit there. To be tired. To be uncertain. To be a woman who made mistakes and still deserved softness. He didn't say it with words, but everything about him said, "You can. Just be." And I did. God, I did. The steam was gone by the time I stood up. The mirror had cleared, but I hadn't looked into it. I wasn't ready to see myself. Not yet. The bathroom was just a bathroom again. Four walls, one light, one sink that didn't leak anymore. No music, no words, just the hum of quiet trying to rebuild itself. He had gone before I came back to myself. I didn't hear the door close. I didn't hear his footsteps fade down the hallway. Only the soft creak of wood where he'd knelt earlier. And the way the air still felt like he was inside it. The towel he used was folded, neat, careful, placed over the edge of the tub like it had been there all along. Like none of it had happened. But it had. God, it had. And not in the way people expect. Not in the way people whisper about or judge or fantasize. It wasn't about lust. Or loneliness. Or crossing a line for the thrill of it. It was something quieter. Something harder to explain. And even harder to forget. It was the way he looked at me. Like I hadn't broken anything yet. Like I wasn't a wrecked home, or a failed promise, or a woman clawing her way out of regret. Just a person. In this moment. Still whole. Still worth something. And maybe that's the real betrayal. Not of vows or marriages or even trust. But the betrayal of believing for too long that I needed to be fixed. He never tried to fix me. He just showed up. Sat down. And let me be exactly who I was. Right there on that bathroom floor. And it changed something. Not loudly. Not all at once. But like a window cracking open after years of being painted shut. The air inside you shifts. You breathe differently. You see the dust dancing in the light. And suddenly, you realize it's been too quiet for too long. I still see him sometimes. He lives 2 doors down. Takes out his trash like everyone else. Drinks his coffee on the steps in the early morning. We don't talk about that day. We don't need to. It's in the way we nod when we pass each other. The way our eyes pause for a second too long. The way I sometimes find myself listening for footsteps that don't come. He doesn't reach for me. And I don't lean in. But something between us still lives. In a space neither of us ever tried to name. And maybe that's what makes it matter. That we never tried to define it. We just let it happen. Let it breathe. And then let it be. Not every story ends. Some just echo. Quietly. Right where they began. Some people don't change your life with promises or grand gestures. Sometimes, it's just presence. The kind of presence that sits beside you in the silence. That doesn't demand anything. But somehow fills all the empty spaces you didn't know you had. That moment we shared. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a story anyone would shout from rooftops. But it rearranged me. Softly, like a quiet tide shifting the sand beneath my feet. I wonder, what did you feel in that moment with me? Did it stir something you've been holding back? Did it remind you of a secret you've never told? Or maybe it just made you breathe a little deeper. If you've ever had a moment like that, one that quietly changes everything, without a word spoken, I'd love to hear it. Share it below. I read every word, every whisper, every confession. Thank you for unfolding this story with me. For trusting me with your time, your heart. You're always welcome here. On Passionate Tales Unfold. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, some stories don't end. They just keep breathing, waiting for someone else to listen.